Hello everyone. For this video we're going to cover briefly what Git and GitHub is, what they are, kind of what they're used for, and a little bit of how to use them, get a new repo set up, that kind of thing. So Git is a version control system. It's very, very common these days. There were other version control systems in the past, but basically Git has taken over in almost any any job that you ever get. You would likely be using Git. So what is version control? Version control is saving multiple versions of the same document. And so if you make a change that breaks something, for example, then you could go back to a previous version of that document without having to say like version 1, version 2, and things like that. So it's very handy. And it also makes it easy for multiple people to work on the same project. So I can get to a file and use it as well as someone else, and you can both branch is what it's called, and you can work on two separate things at once, and you can eventually get the code merged back together and work happily together. Sometimes the happily is a challenge, but we'll work that out. So that's the basic idea. It's just keeping track of all your changes. So as you're writing code, you don't lose anything, because that's tough, because you could be spending hours and hours and hours of time on particular things, and losing that is just hard. It's frustrating. So what we're going to do first is, well, I guess I should say, I'm assuming you have Git installed on your system. I use Linux and I have it installed, and it is very simple to do on a Linux system. And Windows is a little trickier, but this video is not covering the installation of Git. It's more focused on GitHub and that type of thing. So if you're having issues getting Git on your system, maybe I'll make another video covering that topic. But there's tons of resources out there walking you through, depending on your OS. Okay, so assuming we have Git and we're going to GitHub. Okay, so I have a GitHub account. Some of you may not. And mine is mostly just private. Honestly, I don't put a lot on there, but it is widely used in the industry. So what we're going to do is we're going to sign in, and I'm going to sign in to my account. Hopefully I remember my information. And if I forget my password, which is possible, I'll say not now. I didn't forget. Isn't that nice? So I have two-factor, or I guess multi-factor authentication set, and if you're not familiar with that, I assume most people are these days, but you'll generally use a separate app of some sort that will give you a code, or a code can be sent to you via text or something like that. But generally speaking, there's some sort of app that will handle that for the most part these days. So I'm in, as they say. So like I said, a lot of my repos are basically private. There's not a lot going on that's public facing, which in this case is perfectly fine. That's not the point of this. But as you can see, there's kind of like a little sidebar here showing the things that you work on, and what we want is to say new. We're going to create a new repo. So what should we call this repo? So this, we're just going to make a test repo for just demonstration purposes. So let's just say demonstration. How about that? Great. Demonstration description. What is this? So we are creating a repo to show how that works on GitHub. Sounds fantastic. For this, you could do either public or private. I'm actually going to get rid of this repo after the demo, so I'll just leave it as public. It's not a big deal. I generally like to add a README, which then I'll go back and edit and usually I just leave these as defaulted unless you know more about what you're going to be working on. So for now, this is good. So demonstration, that will be the name of our repo. I wonder what we would put in such a repo. Okay, so let's create the repository. Press this button. It will load, take a second. We have a repo. And as you can see, this is our description, which was added to our README file. So the nice thing here, something to note, is that if you have a README file within your project, on the first, the main level of your project at least, it will be displayed here. So this is written in Markdown, and you can stylize things, you can format things in a nice tidy way fairly easily with Markdown. So I highly advise using Markdown. I tend to take notes and do a lot of other things with Markdown. So it's a great thing to learn because of this, and because it's just nice to it's a easy to use, nice structured thing for like note taking and things like that as well. Okay, so now we have a repo, and all that's here is our one file, the README, which is important but not code necessarily, but that's enough for us to get us going. So I suggest using SSH to clone your repositories. You can do it via HTTPS. But that will, I believe you have to have your username and password each time you do that. If you use SSH, you have to store an SSH key here, which that's what I will be using. There's also GitHub CLI, which I'm not super familiar with, but I assume it's just a Windows version of a CLI, a terminal essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So this is the location of our new repo, which is stored on GitHub. And so it's a Git repository, and GitHub is what's serving the content for us. It's going to be saving all of our files so that we can access them wherever we need to. There are many other ways to use Git. You could make your own. You could use something other than GitHub, etc. But in this case, that's what this is telling us. Git at github.com, and then your username and the name of the repo .git. That's typically what you'll see. Okay, so we're going to copy that to the clipboard. Okay, where were we? We were going to copy this URL, and we were going to clone a repo here. And so I'm going to switch so that you can see my terminal here. And what we're going to do is we want to go to the location where we want to clone this thing, and in my case I like to put my stuff in the source directory, and I already have a repo set up called GitHub, or a directory set up named GitHub. So this is where I'm going to clone my repo to in this example. So we're going to say git clone, and we're going to paste in our there we go. And this is our URL to our remote Git repository. This is being posted by GitHub, right? So this is not a local repository, this is a remote. Okay, so here we go. We hit enter. Look at that. We are all good to go. Now, why did this work without a username and password? I have an SSH key set up on my system, and so what that means is that my SSH key, there's a private and public pair, if you're not familiar, and you give the public key portion to GitHub. There's a place to do that within the settings, and you will copy and paste within there, and that will make it so that once you're authenticated, you don't have to use your username and password any longer. Now it kind of your machine is like permanently authenticated, and so that makes it much easier, and you don't have to remember your password or remember to enter it every time. It just is a convenience, and in a lot of ways more secure. Okay, so here we're going to ls, which ls stands for list, I believe, and that shows that we have now a demonstration directory. So we're going to go into that directory here, and we should have a readme. There's our readme. If you do ls-a L is list, but I always do them together, but A will show you the hidden things, and there's a .git directory. And that contains the information that Git uses to track all of your changes. So from here, we now have our README file here. So I'm going to just use a cat, which is like a concatenate, and we're going to cat this just so you can see it on the screen. It's very simple. If you recall, on GitHub we had this there, and it looked very nice, right? So for now, we're going to just leave that as is, and we're going to just make something. We'll just make a test file, and I'm going to use Vim. I'm a Vim user most of the time, and we'll just say test.txt, and we will just say this is a test file. That's so exciting. Okay, we're going to save that, and for those curious about Vim, at the bottom here I pressed escape colon, and I use X, or you can also do WQ, and that will save the file. Now we will do ls-al, and that shows now that we now have a new file, test.txt, with just a little bit of content. Now if we do a git status, we will see our branch is origin main. We will get up to speed on branches a little later, but for now we're just going to stick with that. And it shows that we have one untracked file, test.txt, which means we've changed or created a file, and Git has not yet recorded that change. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say git add test.txt. Okay, now if we do a git status again, we see, look at this. Changes to be committed. We have our new file, test.txt. So that's more or less what we're expecting, what we want. Now there are tools to do this, but I highly suggest doing this from a command line first to learn. Once you learn, then those tools are great. They'll help you, but if you don't understand what you're doing behind the scenes, it could be very confusing to use certain tools. At least I find it confusing. So I prefer to suggest that you learn it kind of the hard way first, and then use a tool to help you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to push our file back to our repo. So what we're going to do is we've already committed. We're going to say git, we didn't commit yet, we added. So we're going to say git commit, and this will commit our changes. And then a -m, and that will allow us to leave a comment, which you should be doing for every commit that you do. And we'll just put something that is somewhat brief, but kind of gives an idea of what we're doing. So we just say, and tense is a hotly debated topic. So I've heard people that don't care. Some people are very strongly in the camp that it needs to be present or past tense, etc. So I'm going to go with this tense, adds a test.txt file, and that's about it. And I have this convention that I had picked up at work that I add my initials. So it adds an extra layer of being able to track back who made the commit, and that's easy when you're easy. It makes it easier to find when something is broken, what set of changes, and who was responsible for those changes to help get that fixed down the road. And so that's why I do that. Okay, so now that we have our message, we're going to hit enter. There we go. So you can see one file changed, created this. Okay, now we're going to say get status again, and we can see we are ahead of origin main by one commit. So for this, I will say git push, and so that is telling us, telling the system that we're going to push our changes to our repository. Ready? There we go. Okay, so this is kind of what you expected output. You'll get something like this, writing objects, some other things that shows where it was pushed to. This is the commit hash. We can look at that later for going back and seeing sets of changes. Okay, so now we're going to switch back to our repo here, and so as you can see, before we saw our readme, you see the formatting is nice here, and that's because of the format of Markdown within that readme. But what we're going to do here, we should just refresh the page, and voila, you can see there is now a test.txt file. See, and it was added 1 minute ago. This is the commit message that we just typed. And if you click here, you can see the file. This is very basic, but it is just right there for you to see. So on GitHub, there are things you can do. There are ways to edit the file. You can compare changes. You can do quite a few things. But just to get us started, this is kind of the basics, and this will get you going. So for file code changes, this is what we'll want to do. We'll want to push those to Git. They're now safe. If we make a change that was breaking in some way, we can now revert back to our original content here, and we can also share with others. If others are able to get to our repo, they could pull our code in. They could make their own set of changes and push those here that we could then receive. And so that is kind of the whole idea, is sharing, keeping track of changes, and it's an organized way of stepping back through changes as needed. So, well, that about wraps up what I intended to cover. There's much more on Git and GitHub, but this is the basics. This will get you a repo created that you can start committing code to. So, hopefully this was helpful. All right, thank you, and I'll see you in the next vid.